Hello and welcome back to the Kind Regards podcast, hosted by yours truly, Zamiwe Mwape. Today's guest is no stranger to career and life transitions. Aside from moving from Zambia to the UK, to the US, and back to Zambia, she has also made some interesting career moves between industries. She went from being KPMG Zambia's first female associate director to heading financial reporting at Paystack, a subsidiary of leading American fintech company Stripe. More recently, she founded Sustainable Impact Advisory, a company that helps organizations integrate sustainability solutions to deliver long-term value whilst positively impacting people and the planet. We'll be speaking to none other than Rabecca Hichilo, Associate Director and Sustainability Leader at PwC Zambia. In this segment of our two-part discussion, she shares her remarkable journey from being a student at Kasisi Girls to working at a Big Four accounting firm in New York and her subsequent return to Zambia. Aside from discussing her dynamic career, we'll also get into the meat of what it's like to move back home from the diaspora. What drove the decision? How did corporate life abroad differ from that in Zambia? What advice would she offer someone looking to settle their life from the diaspora to their home country? Rabecca, thank you so much for coming onto the podcast.
Thank you, Zamiwe. Thank you for having me. I am excited to be a part of the show.
Awesome. So we're going to kick off with some icebreakers just to get to know you a little better.
That's fine. I hope you're not too hard on me, but yeah, we can start.
I'll do my best. Okay, what is a skill or hobby you've always wanted to learn but haven't had the chance to yet?
Skill or hobby? That's interesting. Well, I'd like to say playing golf. I did learn a little bit, but I feel like I've actually forgotten everything I learned. And so I need to get back to that. Yeah, playing golf.
I see. They say business deals are made on the golf course. So, it's a double benefit hobby. So
absolutely.
Definitely go for that.
And an exercise too.
Exactly. What is the most adventurous thing you've ever done?
Adventurous. I'm not adventurous. Let me start off by saying that I'm not adventurous. I shy away from crazy things, don't like to take such risks. So if I think about adventurous, I'd probably say walking with the cheetahs at Chaminuka. I think that's probably the most I've gotten to danger. Yeah.
I feel you. And you see, they make it seem like, it's well behaved, but that's a wild animal.
Exactly.
It could decide to do what it wants at any moment.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you could switch lives with a public figure for a day, who would it be?
That's a tough one, Zamiwe. I'm trying to think now.
I could go first.
Yes, please.
So I think I don't have a specific person in mind, but I think I would probably switch with someone who is a politician simply because it seems that's a position that changes who you are as a person. Whether it's a politician in Africa or in the West, something changes. And I want to know what happens when you are a politician, or let me say a president. When you become a president, something changes.
Right.
So I want to know what happens on that side of things.
And Zamiwe, you're literally speaking along my lines because I would love to be a female president for a day if I could. But then I was caught up trying to think about who are the female presidents right now that I would want to step into their shoes. So I was struggling a little bit to identify one, but ultimately I would want to be in the shoes of a female president.
And finally, as someone who has lived in more than one place, what does home mean to you?
Home is where I can just be myself, just let loose, where I'm with family, mainly kids, husband, just have fun. Yeah, so home is really where the family is at the end of the day.
Lovely. So it doesn't matter whether it's in Zambia or Ghana or New Zealand.
No, it wouldn't matter as long as we're together.
That's beautiful.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, so let's get into it. Who is Rabecca, the person and the professional?
Who is Rabecca? It feels like an interview. Without going into, Rabecca is a chartered accountant. I think I would like to start off by saying Rabecca is a very ambitious and driven lady and always strives to do more than she's currently doing and always trying to find opportunities to set herself apart. That describes Rabecca. So that ultimately sips into who she is on the career front and also what I actually embody on the personal side.
I love that. So we touched earlier on how you've lived in more than one place. What was the career journey or the life journey that wound up with you working and living abroad?
Okay. It's a long story, but I'll try to summarize. So I guess my journey abroad started right after high school. So I went to boarding school here in Zambia at Kasisi Girls. And just after grade 12, 6 months out, my JETS teacher reached out and introduced me to an organization called Pestalozzi International Village. So they basically looked for students from across the world, Zambia, Zimbabwe, Nigeria, Nepal, India. And so he was asked to identify 2 students who he would recommend to go through the interview process. And I was one of the 2 that went through the interview process. So that was my first experience outside of Zambia. And it was a scholarship to complete the international baccalaureate. So if you're not familiar with the IB program, it's basically like A levels, but a little bit more extensive. So it's a 2-year program. And so the idea was you go to the UK for 2 years as part of this program and then go back home. The goal is either you go back home or find an opportunity beyond that. So I spent 2 years in the UK. I obviously applied to universities, got accepted, but then I didn't get the full scholarships I wanted because I needed to get full scholarships because I came from an underprivileged background. So my goal was full scholarship or no scholarship. And then to make things worse, in my second year, my mom passed away. So I had to find that scholarship because I couldn't go back home, basically. So somebody introduced me to a college in Berea, Kentucky. And they basically told me that if you got into that college, you got a full scholarship. And so that's the only university I applied to in the US. I sat for the SATs, applied to Berea College, basically put all my eggs into one basket. And that was, I just have to get accepted into this college. And I did, thankfully. So, and that's how I moved from the UK to the US to start my undergraduate degree in accounting and finance. From day one at Berea College, we worked. So part of the scholarship was a work study program. Really? Yeah. So from day one, you were assigned 10 hours a week to work somewhere. I was a front desk clerk at the historic hotel. As time went on, I identified other roles in the university that would fit my career path. So by the time I was graduating, I worked at the credit union because I was in the finance space. So my undergraduate degree at Berea College, every summer I had an internship. And funny enough, when I look back now, my first internship was actually a program called Entrepreneurship for the Public Good. And now that I'm in the sustainability space, I think back to, oh, wow, you know, we were actually thinking about these things in college. So it was a 2-summer program. The first summer, you went through the course on how you can do entrepreneurship for the public good. And then the second summer, you went on an internship opportunity within the region. And then the third summer, I got the opportunity to join KPMG New York on an internship program. So I spent 3 months in New York on an internship. When the internship was done, I was offered a full-time job. So I was going back to school with a full-time job for my final year of college. And then in that final year, basically finished off. And then when we were all said and done, I moved to New York to pursue my 8-year career at KPMG New York.
Wow. That's an amazing story, you know, and for you to go from Kasisi Girls to working in New York, it's such an amazing story. And the fact that you described your background as underprivileged is interesting. So I would like to know, how did your home background impact how you approached school and work? I know you've touched on it to say in the second year, your mom passed, so you're like, I have no options. I have to get this thing done. But it just seems like from what you're describing, you've always been excellent, which is why you were picked, you know, from Pestalozzi, which is why you got the scholarship to do the IB, which is why you got the scholarship to go to the Kentucky College. And also you went to KPMG and you were interning, you left with a job offer. Do you think the two tie in together? Could you speak to that?
Yeah, I think growing up with an underprivileged background, there's just this extra responsibility. And my mom really never let me loose. Let me say that. She always demanded the highest of me, always insisted that I needed to be the head and not the tail. I remember that verse in Deuteronomy 28:13. She would always remind me that you need to be the head and not the tail. So primary, I would always be striving to be at least in the top 3. And then even just the sacrifices she was making, because she got retrenched when I think I was in primary school. She used to work for ZRA. And then when the restructuring happened, she was one of the people that had to be let go as part of the restructuring. So I knew the sacrifices she was making. And so the little money that she had, she still took me to a private school. And so I always look back and just see the value that she placed on on education. Let me not say private school, but on education itself, because the primary school education I had laid the foundation and then went on to Kasisi. So even there, she just never let me do anything less than my best. And I had that responsibility. And so at school, at Kasisi, I would look for opportunities to just be involved. So I was mainly in JETS. So anything that had to do with JETS, I was in it, whether it's the quiz, Olympiads or projects. I was all about JETS. And that is, I guess when I look back, is the reason why my JETS professor had the opportunity to say, oh, let me pick from these 2 outstanding girls. So I'll definitely say that responsibility and the fact that I wanted to just set myself apart drove me to do better. Yeah, I think it's really that, honestly.
And it's something that you continue to live out, right?
Yeah.
So you mentioned that you had an 8-year career at KPMG New York, which you then decided to transition into a career in Zambia. So how did you come to that decision and what did you do to make it happen?
So at the time I was leaving KPMG in New York, I was a senior manager and I was promoted as I should have been. So basically I never missed any milestone. And that part of my experience was also it was an interesting experience because I worked really closely with my mentors. So I always look back and I think about trying to connect the dots, like what worked. And when I look back, it was really every time I was vying for a promotion or close enough to a promotion, I would always be asking the question, what do I need to do to perform at the next level? And so I would work with my mentors. We would talk about, you should probably get involved in this, do more of that, be more visible in doing X, Y, and Z. So I did have a lot of support in just mapping out how I would transition at every single level. I think, Zamiwe, you're familiar with the structure that comes with Big Four. Like it can be almost clear, like, okay, you've been an associate for 2 years. What's the next thing? How do you work towards the next thing? So I did get promoted at every point. And by the time I was leaving, I was a senior manager. So the decision to leave and come back home, it took about a year maybe for my husband and I to decide. So my husband is the one that brought up the idea. First of all, it wasn't like I was sitting there going let's go back home. But my husband has always had that passion for home, just home was really big for him. And so about a year before we decided to leave in 2017, we started to ask ourselves, do we want to retire in the US or do we want to retire in Zambia? So the more we asked ourselves that fundamental question, the more we realized that, okay, we really need to think about what the next 10 years looks like and ultimately 20, 30 years, like where do we want to be? And the resounding answer was Zambia. We wanted to be in Zambia. So at that point, we then decided, okay, what do we do? You know, how do we map out this transition? So we started to talk to a lot of people. My husband called up a number of his friends, some that had transitioned, just to get a sense of the experience. Like, so how was your transition? What were some of the things that you wish you had done? I mean, we also have our own, wish we had done. But like, we tried to reach out to a lot of people to understand how to best make such a move. How did they do it? He's into farming. So he was talking a lot to his friends that were doing farming, whether it's cattle, goats, just to get a sense of what the landscape looked like, what the opportunities were, because mainly are the opportunities there. For me, it was more, okay, if I transition, I'll just try and identify another big four that I can transition into. So I think the burden was really more for my husband in terms of are the opportunities there and can we basically be comfortable? So we made the decision and then started to actively work towards that. And by June 2017, we packed up and came back home.
Wow. And the decision was made. So clearly you and your husband were on the same page. Is there anything that you needed to do to prepare other people in your lives? Say, for example, the children, they would be moving from a completely different environment to coming home. Is there anything that you needed to do to prepare even yourselves, psychologically, physically? What was that process like?
I think for the kids, it was good that they were very young. So the oldest was 5.
Okay.
And then the youngest was literally a few months old. So literally don't have a say. Didn't have a say.
Yeah, it's not a huge disruption.
Yeah, so
oh my gosh, I'll miss my friends.
So for them, it
I
wasn't
love my
much.
school.
True. So for them, it wasn't much of a disruption. Of course, now they do talk about it, but then there really wasn't much of a conversation to be had other than we're going back home. And for my 5-year-old son, he had been home maybe 2 years before. He was here for about a year with his grandparents. I think there was just a year during busy season where my husband and I were just like, no, let's just send him home. Let's just send him home to his grandparents. So he went for like a whole year.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, when he was 3, I think he was 3 then, when he came home and stayed with his grandparents. So in terms of stakeholders, really, there weren't many because ultimately it was just the two of us getting comfortable with the idea and being on the same page and then actively working towards, okay, what do we need to cut down on? So I think there was a lot of cutting back on expenditure, no unnecessary expenditure. It was save mode, a lot of planning around how should we actually move our stuff. And then also planning around how do we have conversations, because at the same time I was working, for example, by the same time I needed to start having conversations with professionals here in Zambia to understand the accounting landscape as well. So I was also having my own conversations on how do I transition. I was reaching out to partners. I remember reaching out to partners on LinkedIn because I didn't have their account. I would literally send them messages on LinkedIn because I didn't have anything to go with. And I would be like, can I have this conversation?
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So it was a lot of that, a lot of planning in that sense.
So I'm curious to know, you've talked about how you prepared for the transition, and now you touched on how there are things that you guys also think that, we could have done this way. What are those things? And also, what was the transition like when it was now in real time happening? And I know it's ironic to say this. Did you experience any culture shocks by being back in Zambia after, being away for so long? I would say for most of your adult life, right? Because you went abroad as a teenager.
Yeah. I mean, I think the mindset that my husband and I had was sink or swim. And I always tell this to myself, it's sink or swim. So even if things were happening that maybe were not going according to plan, we still just forged ahead. And when I think back to maybe some of the things we could have done differently is maybe acquired land before we actually came home, just something, anything, right? Because it did it felt like we were behind when we heard what our peers were doing. So there was that thing of where you kind of felt like, oh, what were we doing? But then there was an aspect of perhaps when our peers were buying land, we were thinking we had a long-term goal to retire in the US. So we're not really thinking about Zambia, right? And so if I could think back to what maybe if there's somebody out there that is in the diaspora, I think it's really important to have clarity on what your long-term view is. Imagine if we had known 5 years out that we wanted to go back home. Instead of deciding in 2016, if let's say we decided in 2012 that, in 2017, we need to transition. I think our transition would have been completely different because we would have invested differently. We would have effectively prepared ourselves differently. But that's the only thing that I can think about. I think it's the sooner you know, the better, because then it helps you just really map out what everything looks like. In terms of the actual landing, okay, you're now home. Everybody was really nice. I remember the first 2 months we didn't have our luggage because it was stuck in some container somewhere.
Oh,
the second
gosh.
container never even arrived. Yeah, some of the things never even arrived.
That's painful.
Yeah, but we had really good friends that I think for the first month or so, we stayed at a friend's house before we actually got our stuff and then moved into our own place. So I'd definitely say transition was okay because I started work, I think a month after I came home. And the fact that I transitioned into KPMG, it felt like I didn't really need to think a lot about the methodology. The only thing that I needed to think about is the culture. I needed to understand the culture, understand how best I could manage the people I was working with. And so there was a lot of learning and unlearning that had happened. So not necessarily culture shocks, but a lot of learning and unlearning that I needed to do quickly. And maybe not really a culture shock, but I think something that still sticks with me is I think I was a bit shocked at just how many side hustles people have, because that's not something I saw happen a lot in the US. So I was like, wait, why are you selling me this? I know. I'd be sitting and wondering, how much time did you actually spend doing this? You could potentially be spending this time, improving yourself so that you can increase your earnings potential on your main hustle. But anyways, that's besides but it's a cultural thing. I've come to realize that it's a cultural thing. Mm-hmm. Everybody has a side hustle. But I think personally, it was a bit shocking, still shocking even today. But I understand that it's what it's what we're comfortable with. But yeah, I think that's the one thing that still sticks out with me. Yeah.
It's interesting you say that, right? Because side hustles have almost become a necessity, right? Okay, so let me ask you this. Have you now bought into the idea of diversifying your income, or are you still of the school of thought, like just spend more time on developing yourself in your main hustle, which is ideally like maybe your corporate career or whatever? Are you still of that school of thought now that you've been home for quite a while now, like over 6 years?
I'm still of the idea that you really should spend as much time, extra time that you have on improving your earnings potential on your main hustle. So if your side hustle maybe is in line with your main hustle, which is unlikely, I think most side hustles are completely off your main hustle because otherwise you would be in conflict, right? I'm a strong believer that use that extra 1 hour to either read an article or go and play golf or read a book or watch a podcast or YouTube something, just so that you're improving yourself, so that you're better at giving yourself a chance to increase your earnings potential. Because what your side hustle is doing, it's giving you extra income. But what if you could better yourself in such a way that you actually make yourself more valuable, either on your current job or at a future job? I'm still of that belief. So it's highly unlikely that you'll find me doing a side hustle.
The hustling life is not for you.
It's highly, because I'm already stretched for time. Where am I going to find that time for a side hustle? I mean, you're a mother, you're a wife, and then you add a side hustle on top of and your job. It's definitely puts a lot of pressure on your day, right? But I'm a believer that you can actually divert that time to increasing your earnings potential.
Fair enough. Okay, so you moved from KPMG US, where you were a senior manager. You joined KPMG Zambia as a senior manager as well. And shortly after, you're promoted to associate director. And I believe you're the first female associate director at KPMG. So some of us got to witness history being made in KPMG live. Are there any lessons or key differences that you noted between being a woman in leadership abroad versus being a woman in leadership back home? And what were your takeaways from that?
I think key differences, I would definitely say that there was a bit more support in the US, only because there were more women in leadership, right? So if I wanted to, find a mentor that has gone the path that I want to travel, it was easy for me to find. I could easily just find a partner and depending on what their profile, because I think I had maybe like 2 or 3 mentors and they were partners. One was a mother, woman. I'm like, okay, so I know what I'm going to tap in from her. And then another has a different profile. I know what I'm going to tap in for her. She's Black. She'll understand the fact that I'm also Black and I have different struggles. So the opportunity to tap into people that have gone before us was amply there, which I didn't see a lot of here. And frankly, it's really that we just don't have enough women in leadership. So if we have less women in leadership, it just means that there's less women that are talking about things that actually matter or how women actually think about certain issues. So I think that was the biggest difference. I think there was a time I was sitting down and trying to figure out who am I going to identify as a mentor? And it was a bit difficult for me because I couldn't find somebody within our structure. And then at the same time, I couldn't go to a competitor and say, oh, I know there's a partner at that firm, maybe I can reach out to them. So I then looked outside the firm or the audit practice basically for mentors. But yeah, I think that's probably the biggest difference is really that we need to get more women in leadership.
Agreed. And I think you bring a really important point, which is that we need women in leadership to support upcoming women, because the fact is a woman's experience in the corporate world, a woman's experience as a leader, how they show up to work and they're expected to show up to work is different from that of a man. And,
Absolutely.
this is just real talk. And I'm not saying you should approach women with the prejudice to say, oh, because they're a mother and a wife, they can't handle certain things. But the fact is that they do have certain demands of their lives that men don't have. And, maybe it's not a case of they can't show up fully, but maybe it's a situation where maybe there's some flexibility that's needed in order for them to handle all these balls that they're juggling. I remember a friend of mine mentioning to say, listen, yes, both my husband and I work, right? But if, say, we have a trip coming up, I'm the one who's going to be involved in like getting everyone ready for, for the trip. Or if she is traveling and the husband is not, she has to ensure that certain structures are put in place while the husband can actually just pack up his bag and go, and this is just real life. So I think the experience and the role that women play in society really has an impact in the corporate world as well. Do you agree with what I'm saying? Because I also don't have children and I'm not married, right? So,
yeah.
But it's just something that I've seen to say, like, I think the empathy of other women who've gone before you in leadership can give you like real life advice to say, listen, this is how you handle this. This is how you, manage these perceptions, et cetera, et cetera.
Right. No, I absolutely agree with you. I mean, at the end of the day, we have our responsibilities at home. At the same time, we have our ambitions at work. And so there are times when you feel like perhaps you're not showing up enough in either one of them. And it can happen because you're trying to integrate both into your life. And having somebody to just sound off what the scenarios you're working through usually makes a difference. And I'll have you know that it's actually one of the main reasons why I agreed to come back home. When my husband suggested it, I thought about, I'll have all this support, but not that my husband wasn't support. Like my husband and I were the two of us for both my children's deliveries. We didn't have somebody come over from Zambia. He would change diapers.
Oh, wow.
He bathed the baby the first week because I was too scared. I was like, this baby is too small. I'm not touching it. But he was there. He showed up and did it for me, right? But then I knew that as a manager, my next level was partnership. And so when the idea was floated in front of me that, we could actually go back home, I thought about the support system I would tap into and the support system I didn't have there. It started to look interesting. I was like, you know what? It's a good idea. I think, I agree with you. And true to it, when I came home, I think the first month, I literally would come home and I didn't know what to do with myself between like 5 or 6 p.m. until like 9 p.m. Because in the US, that was the time when I was like super mommy. Like I get home, I'm literally doing everything. I'm cooking, I'm cleaning, I'm changing this, I'm doing that, and literally only settling down at like 9 p.m., having time to myself. But now, because I had the support, I now have 3 extra hours effectively to figure out what else I could do with myself, right, in terms of improving myself. So yeah, I absolutely love the idea of having that extra, support, people you can talk to, bring and bounce off ideas. I understand that not everybody has the same relationship with whether their spouses, but it helps to get ideas on how do you talk to your husband, for example, or set expectations that this is busy season. There's certain things that you might not see me do because, for the next 3 months, I'm going to be really, really busy, but I'll do my best to basically do X, Y, and Z. But these things will be a bit of a challenge during these next 3 months. Yeah. So I absolutely agree with you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode of the Kind Regards podcast. Be sure to tune in next week for the second half of this conversation, where we discuss leveraging LinkedIn for career growth and the practical aspects of navigating transitions between jobs, such as which transferable skills she found particularly valuable and how to get around the inevitable learning curve that comes with new territory. I know I always say this, but you do not want to miss it. Be sure to subscribe and share this episode with a friend or 3, and follow us on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook at The Kind Regards Podcast. You can also find Rabecca on LinkedIn at Rabecca Hichilo. I wish you an amazing and transformative week ahead. Kind regards, Zamiwe.